There was a time when Pokemon absolutely ruled the world. That's not to say it isn't popular today, but those of us who grew up in the 90s and early 2000s know that it was an entirely different beast back then. Everyone had the games, watched the show, and had the merchandise. Some of my fondest memories with the series involve collecting the cards and trading them with friends at school. Today, such things still exist, but not in the same capacity. Today's game really took me back to that innocent time. It's called Lady In Huan Pikachu Shuai Shou, or in English, Thunder Emperor, The Legend of Pikachu! It's a strange port of Pokemon Yellow dating back to at least 2004 that mixes many elements from the other games in the series. Let's take a look.
Mike the Gamer Guy.
Alright, so I should start out by saying that the version I'm playing in this video is a very particular version of the Pokemon Yellow bootleg. It has been patched with the still-in-progress translation by Lugia 2009. Aside from a great deal of the text being in English now, there are a few other changes in this version of note. First of all, while the sprites themselves are unchanged, their palettes have been reworked to fit better their actual palettes from the Gen 2 Pokemon games, which is also what the sprite designs are based on. A nice touch. Some of the other graphics for the menus have also been changed to either become more vibrant or better suit the English text formatting. Next we have some of the more controversial changes. Personally, I'm not too bothered by these, but I can see how others might be. The patch comes with a music hack, which replaces the game's original Ruby/Sapphire based soundtrack with a more fitting Generation 1 soundtrack, with much higher production values. It sounds really good, but the option to use the original soundtrack just for authenticity purposes would have been nice, I suppose. The other really big change, and this is one that I can really see turning people away from this translation patch, is the inclusion of some new extra trainer battles, including one with the translator himself, Lugia 2009, and two with Professor Oaks, who are also in the same room as one another. This was pretty strange when I first encountered it, and again, it would have been nice to have the option to play this with a bit more authenticity. But, I can let it slide. Since this will likely be the only translation ever released for this game, the hacker can have some fun with it if they choose. And if you really want to partake in the raw Thunder Emperor experience, then the Chinese version probably isn't too difficult to bumble through, especially if you're familiar with the original Pokemon Yellow for Game Boy. Now before we move totally away from graphics and sound, as I mentioned earlier, the Pokemon sprites are taken from the Generation 2 Pokemon games. But in an interesting choice, the overworld graphics, like the original music, is based off of Generation 3. In particular, Fire Red and Leaf Green. It also takes graphics from some other sources, notably the Famicom bootleg of the first Harvest Moon. This gives the game a style which is its own, but not completely foreign. I really like it. It gives the game that extra level of uniqueness which is essential for good pirate games. The music, like I said, is great, but to elaborate a little more, the songs are wonderfully recreated here, and dare I say sound fuller than their original Game Boy counterparts. There's just something about hearing these tunes through a Famicom that's really great. Overall, good sound and good graphics. So let's move on to the most important part of a game, the game itself. Now first of all, it needs to be said that the developers at Shenzhen Nanjing really did a fantastic job converting the environment and overall scenario of Pokemon Yellow onto the Famicom. It's not an exact one-to-one conversion, and that's not very surprising, but I was astonished at how much of it carried over and was instantly recognizable to me. For the most part, these changes are welcome, or at least don't distract from the game. Giovanni's Gym, for example, originally had a puzzle involving sliding tiles, which is pretty unpopular with Pokemon fans. It's completely removed here. Another element, though, that is a little disappointing to see missing, is the lack of a Daycare Man, though his house is still present. Perhaps he was intended to make an appearance, but they forgot about him, ran out of time, they were just lazy. There are a few more differences, but they're special, so I'll save them for a little bit later. So as far as scenario goes, this is a fairly faithful recreation, but that doesn't really matter too much if the gameplay itself isn't good. So how is the gameplay? Well, unsurprisingly, there's a ton to cover here. Basically the core Pokemon gameplay is retained. Walk around, find Pokemon, catch Pokemon, and use said Pokemon to fight other Pokemon to collect more Pokemon, or gym badges. The formula is unmistakable. That being said, there are some differences which are sure to throw off veterans of the series. The battle system in particular seems somewhat incomplete. The attacks work and deal damage, decrease stats, or add status effects where applicable, but the amount of damage and the secondary effects themselves are seemingly off. For example, any attack that lowers attack, defense, or special attack and special defense does nothing. Though I'm not a Pokemon expert by any means, the amount of damage attacks dealt is very apparently off. The discrepancy appears to be caused by base damage and power being flipped, but like I said, I'm no expert. The result of this is almost universally weaker attacks, with a few exceptions. At times, even super effective attacks deal not even 1/6 of a health bar, and this is probably just me, but I swear that the opponents, regardless of level, deal more damage than they take. Status effects for the most part work as intended, but with buffs or nerfs to their effectiveness. Paralysis is really powerful when used on opponents, and really helps even out the ineffectiveness of your normal attacks. Same with Poison and Burn, which seem to have higher chances of working, which is also true of Freezing and Sleep, but unfortunately, the former doesn't work. Though the freeze effect may appear on the screen, it does nothing, which is pretty disappointing. All of this together really makes for a much harder kind of Pokemon, but not one that is entirely unrecognizable. In fact, I rather enjoyed this extra challenge. You really have to balance your use of attacks and status effects to get the most damage. I think that hardcore RPG and strategy fans will find a lot here. Just as a heads up though, the Elite Four will be especially challenging. Before moving away from the battles, there's a pretty major addition into battling that I really love. If you win a battle in this version, there's actually a chance that the Pokemon will drop an item, like a TM, Potion, or Evolutionary Stone. I especially like Potion drops, because you run out of money pretty quickly in this game. Trainers give out very little, and when gym leaders constantly use max potions, you're going to need recovery items of your own. Sure, these drops might not necessarily make a ton of sense, but it does give extra incentive during long sessions of leveling, as well as give you a reason to stay and fight wild Pokemon despite having a 100% chance of running from fights in this game. I should also mention that like TMs, HMs also exist in this game, albeit in a slightly different way. While you can teach your Pokemon them, it isn't required to use them. A new HM menu allows the trainer itself to harness the power of hidden machines, which is incredibly helpful, and no longer any need for HM slaves. So let's head out of battle and back to those changes I mentioned earlier. First of all, and unsurprisingly, there is no trading possible in this game despite there actually being an area to do it. But what this means is that all Pokemon only obtainable through trading evolve at level 40, which is great. Personally, I always thought trade-only Pokemon was a terrible idea. A terrible idea which probably sold tons of extra copies of the game, so probably not that bad for them. Pikachu can also, unlike the Game Boy version, be evolved through a Thunderstone, and as this is the only way you can obtain a Raichu, it's pretty much required if you want to complete the Pokédex. In fact, in this game, every Generation 1 Pokemon is obtainable through some means. Plus, there's 8 extra legendary Pokemon from Gens 2 and 3 that you can obtain. These Pokemon are the subject of the last thing I want to talk about. Legendaries in this game, at least the Gen 1 Legendaries, are for the most part caught the same way as usual, excluding Moltres that now appears as a one-time only random encounter in the Pokemon Mansion. They, however, have extremely low catch rates, making them real prizes to collect. Of course, this also means everyone's favorite OP Psychic Pokemon, Mewtwo, is catchable as well, which by extension means there is some post-game content. Quite a substantial amount, actually, where you can catch not only Mewtwo, but also later gen Pokemon like Entei and Ho-Oh. The way you do this is really cool, so I won't spoil it, but just for reference, the process reminds me a lot of those fake methods for catching Mew people used to post online. Guys, I'm telling you, he's under the truck. They put the truck there to hide him. There is one oddity in all of this, however, and that's Lugia. For whatever reason, maybe this is another change by Lugia 2009, I mean, his name is Lugia after all, but he can be encountered in the very first route of the game, and unlike Moltres, it will appear multiple times. I myself encountered it 3 times before catching it. But, to sum everything up, Pokemon Yellow for the Famicom is a real treat. Though hardcore Pokemon fans might find it too different for their liking, those nostalgic for the old games, or those who are looking for a considerably more challenging yet still engrossing and enjoyable take on Pokemon, should give it a look. Thank you all for watching.